The galaxy is old, its empires are powerful, and its wars are endless. Humanity stands. These are the Empyrean Chronicles.
Run the Storm, an Empyrean Chronicles HFY story. No commander in the Coalition had ever attempted the Halcyon Reach crossing during combat. Not because it was forbidden, not because it was impossible on paper, because anyone who knew what Halcyon Reach really was understood that trying to fight inside it was the same as handing your fleet to physics and hoping physics happened to be in a merciful mood. Space there did not behave properly. Light bent where it should not bend. Sensors whispered lies. Engines pushed against gravity 1 second and fell with it the next. Tiny collapsed stars drifted through the region in dark, silent currents, too small to light the void and too heavy to ignore. Ships that clipped one by accident were usually not destroyed in any dramatic sense. They were simply there one moment and gone the next, torn open by forces their hulls had never been designed to survive. Which was why Commander Dareth of the Coalition Pursuit Group felt a stab of cold surprise when the human fleet turned toward it. He stood on the command tier of the cruiser Night Talon and watched white symbols sweep across the tactical sphere. Human ships, 12 principal warships, and a scattering of escorts were withdrawing on a shallow arc away from the battle zone, their engine wakes painted in blue. "They continue to retreat," said Tactical Monitor Jalek. "No reversal in thrust, no attack posture." Dareth clasped his hands behind his back. The bridge of the Night Talon was a dark oval chamber ribbed in black alloy. Purple status lights moved like blood through veins set beneath the floor and walls. Around him, officers watched their stations with disciplined stillness. The Coalition did not waste motion. Across 5 systems, however, the humans had wasted plenty. They had been retreating for weeks. At each colony world or relay station, they struck fast, hit supply ships, destroyed sensor nodes, forced the Coalition to redeploy, then broke contact just before encirclement. Annoying, costly, embarrassing if Dareth allowed himself honesty. The Coalition had superior numbers, better beam arrays, and centuries of naval doctrine refined by long empire. Yet the humans kept escaping. They did not fight like a species that respected proper battles. They fought like raiders with maps no one else possessed. "Magnify the lead elements," Dareth said. The tactical sphere expanded. White human icons stretched into hull outlines compiled from previous engagements. 2 destroyers, 9 cruisers, 1 heavy dreadnought lagging at the rear, and a shifting cloud of escorts. Oddly shaped vessels moved among them as well, larger and slower, almost hidden inside the formation. Dareth narrowed his eyes. "Those transports have remained near the center since the engagement began." "Yes, Commander," Jalek replied. "Probable ammunition or engineering support." "Or wounded." That explanation satisfied no one, but the bridge crew acknowledged it with silence. Ahead, the dim crescent of Halcyon Reach floated across the display like a stain in space. The boundary itself was invisible to the naked eye. Only long-range gravitic sweeps revealed the unstable region, layered tides, moving nodes, distortions drifting like weather fronts in deep vacuum. No sane fleet went in if there was any other path. The human ships continued straight toward it. "They are either desperate," said First Officer Tell, "or they know something we do not." Dareth allowed himself a thin smile. "Every hunted species convinces itself there is a clever place to make a last stand. Do you believe this is one?" "I believe they are out of room." He looked again at the larger, slower signatures tucked inside the human line. If those were supply ships, the humans were preserving logistics. If they were casualty carriers, that meant the enemy was weaker than reports suggested. Either way, they were protecting something. Dareth had no intention of letting them keep it. "Order Pursuit Pattern 6, he said. "Wide front. Maintain command spacing. No vessel is to enter the Reach independently." Tell inclined his head. Yes, Commander. The coalition formation adjusted. Scores of ships altered course in precise relation to one another, dark wedges and spined cruisers gliding into a layered killing arc. To Dareth, it was beautiful. Order, pressure, certainty. The human fleet reached the edge of Halcyon Reach. They did not slow. Several officers on the bridge forgot their discipline long enough to glance up from their stations. They have crossed the boundary, Jalek said quietly. Dareth stared for 3 heartbeats. Then he said, "Follow them." A few heads turned. Tell did not argue, but his voice lowered a fraction. "Commander, the Reach is unmapped at combat speed." "So is their thinking," Dareth replied. "And yet they continue to surprise us. We will not lose them now." The Night Talon accelerated. One by one, the ships of the Coalition entered the dark water after the prey. Captain Elias Ward felt the deck shiver under his boots as the UEF Dreadnought Resolute crossed into Halcyon Reach. The shiver had no sound. In normal space, a vessel spoke through the frame, engines, dampers, vibration in armor plate. Here, the ship seemed to flinch in silence, as if it had touched something cold. The bridge lights brightened automatically to compensate for distortions beyond the main viewports. Outside, the stars looked wrong. A handful had stretched into pale hooks. Others doubled themselves, then snapped back. A thread of blue engine light from one of the escort cutters bent around empty space and vanished. "Navigation?" Ward asked. Lieutenant Tomlin did not look up from his pit. "Still have a lane, sir. I'd prefer not to swear it remains the same shape for long." A few tired smiles moved across the bridge. Ward allowed himself one. That was why he liked Tomlin. In a crisis, the man remained calm enough to be honest and honest enough to remain useful. Commander Marcus Vale stood beside the tactical table. One hand braced on its edge as symbols rolled and re-rolled under the influence of gravitic interference. Vale was broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and carried the permanent expression of a man who believed every plan should include one more layer than currently visible. On most days, that made him exhausting. On days like this, it made him invaluable. "They're still on us," Vale said. "Lead enemy elements fully committed." Ward nodded. "Good." Months of withdrawals had taught the Coalition exactly what he wanted them to learn. That the United Earth Fleet was brave in flashes, dangerous in short bursts, and unreliable under sustained pressure. That humans were good at improvisation and bad at discipline. That if pushed hard enough, they ran. The trick to any deception was patience. The harder part was surviving long enough for the enemy to believe it. At the center of the formation, the convoy held tight around the biggest lie in the system. 3 of the bulky ships ahead were not ammunition carriers. They were full of refugees. Not human refugees. Cathari families from the colony on Ardis, loaded in darkness while the Coalition pushed toward the outer orbit. Small, gray-skinned children with wide gold eyes. Elderly civilians wrapped in thermal sheets, dock workers, medics, 2 teachers who had refused to board until every student in their charge was accounted for. Strange faces, thin hands, a people who had expected the Coalition to exterminate them for having traded with humanity. Ward had seen them in the cargo bay before departure. He had seen the old male who tried to stand and salute, despite not understanding human customs. He had seen one little girl asleep against a crate strap, too exhausted even to be afraid. He had seen Sergeant Owen Harlan kneel in powered armor, remove his helmet, and hand a frightened child his canteen like the galaxy outside the hull was not on fire. Those images had hardened the plan into something personal. "Range to trigger zone?" Ward asked. Vale checked the board. 5 minutes, maybe less if the currents shift in our favor. Do they ever do that? Not for our enemies. That drew a few more smiles, thinner this time. Ward looked to his comm officer. "Convoy status." Refugee carriers report stable life support. Escort groups Lantern and Pike maintaining screen. Marine detachments posted in all transfer corridors. Any panic? A pause. Some. Less than expected. Ward imagined the civilians feeling the reach through the deck like everyone else. Ships did not need words to know when they had entered dangerous space. He stepped toward the central board. Signal all units. Phase 2. Acknowledge lights blinked across the display. The formation changed at once. Human cruisers began to separate into staggered bands. Escorts peeled wide. One destroyer cut port, the other dipped below the primary plane. To an outside observer, it would look like stress fractures in a failing retreat. Like fear, finally overcoming order. In truth, every movement had been flown in simulation so many times, Ward sometimes saw the lanes in his sleep. At the edge of the board, the Resolute began the widest turn of all. Vale glanced over. Still strange hearing the command out loud, Ward kept his eyes on the board. It should be. He keyed his command channel. Helm, take us the long way around. Aye, sir. The dreadnought rolled gently and began its great looping arc away from the rest of the fleet, heading deeper into the warped dark. On the bridge of the Night Talon, Commander Dareth watched the human formation fray. Their line is breaking, Jalek said. It is changing shape, Dareth corrected. Do not mistake motion for collapse until collapse is confirmed. But inside, he felt the first hint of unease. Human vessels were peeling off in vectors that made no doctrinal sense. Instead of maintaining mutual support, they were widening the battle space. Some dipped into denser gravitic regions. One destroyer vanished for 3 seconds behind a distortion veil and reappeared on a line no Coalition navigation officer would have chosen willingly. Then there was the dreadnought. The large human ship had detached from the rear and was carving an immense outer arc through the reach, moving away from its own formation and, for the moment, away from the enemy entirely. What is that vessel attempting? Dareth asked. Unknown, said Jalek. Either evasion or flanking. Inside Halcyon Reach? No answer came. The Coalition pursued anyway. Once committed, fleet momentum was not merely physical. It was psychological. If Dareth slowed now, the humans might slip deeper into the Reach and vanish into sensor fog. If he pushed too hard, he risked disarray. He chose pressure. Forward elements advance by alternating knots, he said. No vessel is to chase a single target beyond support range. Orders rippled outward. For a moment, the system seemed to settle. Then every alarm on the bridge sounded at once. Gravity spike! Shouted the sensor chief. The tactical sphere convulsed. One calm representation shattered into layers of red, amber, and black. Distortion fronts bloomed ahead and beneath the fleet, invisible masses shifting like stones dropped in water. What triggered it? Dareth snapped. We do not know! He looked at the display and understood one thing immediately. The humans did. Small objects, too small to matter in ordinary battle, flared on the board near 3 drifting singularity nodes. Charges, probes, field hammers. Whatever they were called in human terminology, they had been seated here long before the fleet arrived. Months of raids and retreats had not been random harassment. They had been cover. Cover for survey work, cover for preparation, cover for turning Halcyon Reach itself into a weapon. Stabilize formation, Dareth barked. Too late. The lead Coalition cutter yawed sideways as a gravity current grabbed it. A cruiser behind it corrected too hard, clipped the cutter's stern, and both vanished into a rolling lens of compressed light. On the far side of the formation, a destroyer tried to climb above the distortion plane and tore itself in half under differential stress. The bridge of the Night Talon dimmed as power surged to engines and inertial dampers. Compensators at overload, cried an engineer. Dareth braced against the command rail. Vector us clear of the strongest gradient. Tell's hands moved over his console. Trying. The gradient moved. Impossible. Nothing that heavy should move that fast. Unless the current itself had changed. Dareth stared as the board resolved a pattern through the chaos. The human ships were not fleeing the storm. They were moving with it, sliding between pressure seams, crossing invisible rivers they had somehow charted in advance. They mapped the tides, Tell said, horror flattening his voice. Yes, Dareth replied. They did. Then the dreadnought returned. From the outer arc of Halcyon Reach, Captain Ward watched the Coalition fleet drift exactly where he had hoped, and exactly where he would never have willingly brought his own people by accident. The bridge was very quiet now. Not because the danger had passed, because it had arrived. Ahead, the enemy formation was no longer a blade. It was a bundle of dark shapes struggling to keep orientation while gravity rippled through them in uneven sheets. Some ships managed partial control. Others were already dead and had simply not realized it yet. Current 3 is folding, Tomlin said. If they push starboard, it throws them deeper. If they hold, current 2 catches them from below. Vale exhaled slowly. A maze with only bad exits. Ward nodded. And one path we left open. On the tactical board, a narrow, safe corridor glimmered in green. Not entirely safe. Nothing in the Reach deserved that word, but survivable if taken immediately and in disciplined order. He had left it visible on purpose. Predators always lunge toward gaps. "Bring us up behind them," Ward said. The Resolute surged forward, its white hull passing through bent starlight like a blade dragged through dark water. Below and ahead, human cruisers emerged from distortion banks one after another, striking from angles the Coalition had not guarded because no sane fleet should have been able to attack from there. "Convoy?" Ward asked. Vale touched his earpiece. "Still moving. Refugee carriers have crossed Marker Lark. Lantern Group reports minor hull scoring from debris, no mission loss." "Good." Behind the command reserve bulkhead, lives measured in hundreds of quiet breaths rode inside civilian hulls and cargo decks. All of this had one purpose: get them through. "Main gun charged," said Weapons Officer Pierce. Ward looked toward the forward viewport. Through the lensing chaos, he found the Night Talon by silhouette, a long predatory cruiser with 3 forward spines and a command core protected by layered armor pedals. "That ship has been chasing us since Kepri Gate," Vale said. "I know. Would be satisfying." Ward gave him a sidelong glance. "Professional satisfaction only, Commander." "Of course." The bridge crew laughed once, sharply, from nerves more than humor. Ward keyed ship-wide command. "All hands, stand by for full release strike. Remember your lanes. Remember your marks. No one gets clever in the Reach." Across the fleet, confirmations chimed. The human doctrine that infuriated Coalition tacticians was often mistaken for chaos. It was not chaos. It was controlled initiative, flexibility inside intent. Every captain under Ward had permission to improvise, but only after understanding the objective so well that deviation still served it. Today, the objective was simple. Break the pursuit, save the convoy, teach the enemy why the long way around could be deadlier than the direct path. "Target solution on enemy flagship," Pierce said. Ward watched the green firing ring settle over the Night Talon. He thought of the children on the refugee carriers, of the dock workers, of the old Cathari male trying to salute a species not his own because he had run out of other ways to say thank you. Fire. The spinal railgun slammed. Even with dampers, the shot hit the ship like a giant fist. A tungsten spear crossed the warped distance and punched through the Night Talon's command section in a line of white-hot ruin. Armor flared, folded, and burst outward in spinning shards. "Direct hit!" Before the cheer finished, human missile boats loosed broadsides. Smart munitions rode predicted gravity channels, curving through the reach like hunting birds following wind. Coalition ships fired back, but their beams lanced into false positions, refracted into nothing, or struck currents and went wide. "Destroyer Valiant reports 2 kills, Vale said. Cutter Group Pike is harrying the rear. Convoy has entered Corridor Green." Ward kept his gaze on the board. "Any sign the enemy sees the exit?" "Yes," Tomlin answered. "They all see it now." "Then the smart ones will run." "And the proud ones?" Ward watched a cluster of coalition cruisers attempt to regroup for a charge toward the human center. They made it 6 seconds before a distortion front rolled over them and smashed one ship into another. He said, "The Reach will keep them." Commander Dareth came back to awareness tasting copper. Smoke, or the nearest equivalent from burned systems, hung in the bridge air. Half the tactical sphere was gone. Tell lay slumped over his station, alive but bleeding darkly from a cut along the brow ridge. 3 bridge crew had vanished from their positions entirely, likely when the rail strike vented the upper tier. "Report," Dareth said, and only then realized one side of his jaw was numb. Jalek answered from somewhere below. "Command Core breached but holding. Primary sensors degraded. Formation." He hesitated. "Formation no longer exists." Dareth pulled himself upright and looked through the fractured forward screen. The Reach had become a cathedral of violence. Human ships flashed in and out of distortion windows with impossible timing. Coalition vessels drifted burning or tumbling, some still trying to form lines inside a battlefield that no longer rewarded lines. Beyond it all, farther than he had first understood, the bulky transport signatures were moving away under heavy escort. Not supply carriers, not casualty hulks, evacuation ships. Everything focused inside him with sudden, brutal clarity. "They brought civilians through this," he said. Jalek stared up. "Commander, the convoy, that is why they ran. That is why they kept refusing decisive battle." As he watched, a human destroyer rolled between 2 collapsing gradients and took a beam meant for one of the slow carriers. It died instantly, hull splitting, but the carrier lived and continued onward. Dareth felt a strange emotion then. Not pity, not admiration exactly. Recognition. He had mistaken human withdrawals for fear because his own doctrine treated protection as weakness. You shielded command assets. You preserved munitions. You did not drag civilians through a war zone unless they belonged to your own species and strengthened your own future. The humans had done it for outsiders. Worse, from a tactical standpoint, they had planned brilliantly around that moral choice. They had accepted a slower formation, months of harassment, and the humiliation of apparent retreat in exchange for one battlefield where conviction and preparation could outweigh superior force. No coalition textbook had prepared him for an enemy willing to look cowardly for that long in order to be effective at the exact right moment. "Can we still pursue?" Dareth asked. Jalek checked dead screens and failing readouts. "Not through this, Commander." Dareth looked once more at the shrinking convoy markers. "No," he said. "Not through this." He keyed the battered fleet channel. "All surviving coalition vessels, disengage by the marked corridor. Ignore human bait. Hold spacing. Any captain who breaks formation dies alone." The order went out. Some obeyed. Some were already beyond obedience. As the Night Talon limped toward the only path the humans had deliberately left open, Dareth understood the insult hidden within it. The humans had not merely beaten him. They had chosen whether he lived long enough to understand why. 3 hours later, the far edge of Halcyon Reach opened like a door. One by one, white UEF ships emerged into normal space around the convoy. On the bridge of the Resolute, exhaustion settled over everyone at once. The enemy was gone. The strange pressure in the hull eased. Stars became stars again instead of questions. "Last refugee carrier is clear," said comms. All convoy vessels accounted for. A breath ran through the bridge, half relief and half disbelief. "How many did we lose?" Ward asked. Vale's face tightened as he reviewed the tally. 2 cutters, 1 destroyer, heavy damage to cruiser Ashdown. We'll have wounded counts in a minute. Ward absorbed the names in silence. Victory never arrived alone. Someone always escorted it. He said, "Signal medical priority to all damaged ships, then patch me to the convoy masters." Moments later, 3 civilian faces appeared on the side display. Human cargo captains, grease-stained and hollow-eyed. Behind them, in one frame, Ward could see movement. Blankets, stacked crates, the dim outline of civilians sitting wherever there was room. "Captain Ward," said the lead convoy master, voice rough with fatigue. "We have the Cathari manifests. Final count still in progress, but most are stable." "Most?" "A few critical cases from Ardes didn't survive the first jump. None lost during the crossing." Ward closed his eyes once. Understood. In the third frame, a small gray face appeared at the edge of the view, peering around an adult's arm. One of the Cathari children, wide golden eyes, watching the human officer in silence. Ward found himself straightening unconsciously, as if standing in front of something solemn. "Tell them," he said quietly, "they're safe now." The convoy master glanced off-screen, listening to a translator repeat the words. The child did not smile, did not wave. She only kept watching, like someone trying to decide what kind of species would carry strangers through the worst part of the dark instead of leaving them behind. The line ended. Vale came to stand beside him at the viewport. Below, the convoy drifted in a protective shell of warships scarred by battle and lensing burns. "The Coalition will remember this," Vale said. "Yes, they may even learn from it." Ward gave a tired smile. "Then they'll become more dangerous." Vale folded his arms. Was it worth it? Ward thought of the bodies they had yet to count, of the destroyer captain who had taken the beam, of the Marines in the cargo decks keeping order among people not their own, of the child with the golden eyes. He said, "Ask me that when the next convoy calls." Vale studied him, then laughed softly. "That's not an answer. It is for humans." Behind them, officers resumed movement, slower now. Damage control, casualty routing, reports. The endless work that followed any battle still survived. Ward rested a hand on the command rail and looked out over the ships. Other species often mistook the simplest human instinct. They assumed humans saved themselves first because survival was logical, because self-interest was efficient, because every empire in history had taught that protecting your own mattered more than protecting anyone else. Sometimes that was true. But humans had another instinct, older and far less tidy. When they saw the vulnerable cornered, when they saw civilians trapped between power and indifference, a certain kind of human refused the shortest route to safety, refused the easy calculation, refused the victory that required looking away. They took the long way around, and every so often, that made them the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy.
If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of humanity rising among the stars, please like, comment, and subscribe. New stories are released regularly here on Empyrean Chronicles.